Hello and welcome to Reiki Women Podcasts. It's Bronwen Logan here from Reiki with Bronwen, and I have with me my two colleagues. There's Carrie Varela from the Reiki Healing Society. Hi, Carrie. And Michaela Daystar from Heartscapes Reiki. So we're all here today, and we're going to talk about a subject that is interesting to a lot of practitioners, whether they're professional or they've just finished a Reiki 1 or Reiki 2 or Reiki 3 class. And it's the word clients. So if you finish a class, for example, and, in your class, you've learned how to do a Reiki treatment on others as well as yourself, how do you find those others? So your family, some families may not be helpful. I don't know. Friends, they might be excited or not. So how do you find someone to actually practice on? And if you're a professional, it's a big question. So I'm going to throw this over to Carrie. And what are your thoughts on this, Carrie?
Yeah, I love that. There's kind of two veins with this topic. And firstly is, how do you make that leap to giving Reiki to others? If that's your interest in learning Reiki, giving Reiki to others, maybe it's something that, you want to do professionally one day, but you have to practice before you can, open up your own shop, but, have a brick and mortar Reiki business. You have to have time to practice with others. So I think that's a little tender time in, our exploration with Reiki. And I've seen it, not just within Reiki, but also like yoga, like taking a yoga teacher training and then, having this amazing new professional skill and then wanting to put it into action. And, it does require flexing that inner muscle around putting yourself out there. And so, how to go about doing that. And then the complexity of getting clients as a Reiki professional is like kind of another level of that discussion. So I'll touch in with the amateur part, my thoughts on the amateur part, and then maybe a few thoughts on how to get them professionally. So hopefully they'll kind of interweave together. But one of the things that I've really found that is important for particularly my local community, and I'm trying to build it more for the folks that I'm connected with, over the internet and over the WWW, in the world of Reiki, is creating opportunities for my students to practice. And so I think this really shows how we can weave together actually these two topics. So as a Reiki professional, if you're training others in Reiki, one task, a way you can really support your students is giving them opportunities to practice. So some of us might have just a shoe-in, like let's say our husband or a partner or a sibling or somebody sick in our family just absolutely wants Reiki. And so we have this complete opportunity to give them Reiki anytime we want. We have that relationship with someone we feel really comfortable, and then over, practice and time with that particular person, getting more familiar and comfortable with how to give a Reiki treatment. So I always look, would encourage people to start there, to look for that person in your life who would be really open to receiving Reiki, and developing some accountability in a relationship where you can do that for them, and get more comfortable and get more experience giving Reiki. But then also, working with your Reiki teacher to see if there's opportunities to provide Reiki through that community. So like for my local community, I've been doing a monthly Reiki practice circle where my students can get together and we can practice Reiki on each other, because I think that's ultimately one of the more supportive atmospheres that we can give Reiki with, is somebody else who's done a training, who wants to give Reiki sessions themselves and then can provide you some great feedback. Oh, when you would put your hands right there on my belly, it just felt like really heavy. Maybe I would consider lightening it up. But other than that, that felt really great, giving them some feedback. And sometimes when we're just giving Reiki to other people, they won't necessarily give you that feedback. So I think it's a great thing to offer for your students if you are a Reiki teacher, giving people opportunities to practice together. And then I'm also just trying to branch that out and offer more opportunities to practice for online. And so, like, I've been doing a monthly healing circle, which is really about me, giving a guided Reiki practice to others. But I do want to expand that at some point to like give other people opportunities to teach those. But I think it's, one of the a great ways. And I don't always necessarily, I mean, I think sometimes posting in Reiki oriented groups, trying to find a Reiki practice buddy, I think that that's also a good way to get some practice and experience. And then also taking a Reiki training with a friend. So finding a little Reiki buddy and like kind of linking arms with somebody right from the outset can be really nice too, because take the trainings together and then immediately have somebody to practice on. But all that aside, sometimes the tendency is to be really focused outwardly on how to give Reiki to others. But I always encourage my students to really start with themselves and remember that it's really not, you can't just say, I don't have anybody to give Reiki on. You always have yourself, and you can always give Reiki to yourself and develop energetic sensitivity, an awareness of the energy. You can use it for your own self-healing and like, test it in the laboratory of your own inner experience. And all of that really does ultimately lead into building a strong foundation of confidence and trust to share it with others as well. Also, sharing with animals is a great thing to do. And then I guess the other thing that I attempt to encourage my students who are interested in giving Reiki out to others is kind of like if they do have social media or just a way to send an email to maybe 10 or 20 people that they know that potentially could be interested in offering out to give like 10 sessions for free to folks. And just see if there's people in your community who would really appreciate that kind of offering, starting there. So I think all of that builds you that inner muscle that I was talking about really creating a resilience around putting yourself out there. And so as a Reiki professional, this is one thing that you have to get really good at is, putting your offerings out there to the world, sharing with your community what you're up to, what you believe in, creating workshops and offerings that feel really aligned with who you are as a healer or as a Reiki practitioner, if you feel more aligned around those words. And building community around those offerings that you have, and finding communities and businesses like a healing center that are also aligned with what you're doing, so you don't have to completely do it all yourself, but that you can kind of be in the flow with other practitioners who are building a similar type of practice, or complementary practice with yourself. That's one of like, I don't know, a gazillion different strategies you could go about to build a professional Reiki practice. And it just takes time. It really does take time. And one of the things that I've been really learning about this process is that your growth is exponential. So it's like if you find one client that is really a solid client for you, or even just one person in your life who you can give Reiki to, that eventually leads to 2 people, and those 2 people lead to 4, and those 4 lead to 8, and then it's like this J curve of people that you have a capacity to impact and support. And it's an ever evolving process, but it does take time. So sometimes you can only see the one person that you're working with, but through that one person, more and more come to you. And when I lived in Denver, I practiced there for about 10 years, and it was one I got to this place where I just was getting so many word of mouth and client referrals and student referrals that it was just became very self-sustaining. So it's definitely possible. I had to rebuild that in my new location, but I'm starting to see those kinds of positive breakthroughs, and so it's definitely possible. It just takes time. So I love to hear these other wise women here on the
Yeah.
podcast. I love to hear your thoughts about this topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of those fundamental important topics when we're thinking about expanding our practice beyond our self practice and beyond our immediate circle of friends and family. And it can be an intimidating topic because many of us go into wanting to share Reiki professionally because we love the system of Reiki and we want to support people and we, have a heart for it, not because we have a mind for business and strategy necessarily. Some of us do. Some of us have that beautiful blend, which is a nice unicorn to be. That was not me. I absolutely began my Reiki business with precisely zero knowledge about how to run a successful business. So, I appreciate Carrie you talking about the way that it does take time. And we can help ourselves to shorten that time by, some kind of fundamental understandings and strategies around this idea of connecting with clients. And I want to really emphasize that word connecting and relationship building, because honestly, we're talking about marketing, right? How do you reach out from where you are to people who might want your services and communicate to them in a way that lets them say, yes, that person, I want that person to do these services. And marketing can be kind of a yucky word because there's a lot of really gross and manipulative marketing out there. Most of us have been subjected to marketing that doesn't feel good, and we don't want to duplicate that in our Reiki practice. And unfortunately, that can lead us to avoiding marketing altogether and to really lean into, Reiki will sell itself, the universe will provide, yes, the universe can provide, but we have to collaborate with that provision through our actions. So some basic places to start when we want to think about that expansion out from our close friends and family who might kind of be a soft entry point for us, is thinking about truly, who are the clients in our community that we want to be working with? Are they people who already know what Reiki is and are seeking that? There may be some of those folks. There's probably also folks who would very much benefit from Reiki, who might be seeking some of the outcomes of receiving Reiki, but don't necessarily know that Reiki is the strategy to get them those outcomes. Too often we'll talk about what we do as providing Reiki or providing healing sessions or energy sessions, and not necessarily emphasize what are the practical outcomes that a person can experience because they have done a Reiki session. So understanding who our people are, what their existing knowledge about Reiki might be, we can be curious about that. And then therefore, how do we talk about Reiki in a way that really emphasizes those outcomes, right? What is it that people are trying to get, right? Do you live in a place where there are a lot of professional people who are dealing with high stress and high anxiety, a lot of pressure from their work environment? They might have a different need, a different outcome than people who are living, in different types of lifestyles. So really being able to understand what are the outcomes that the people you want to work with are working with. Having a sense of where your particular community is, right? I know as a Reiki professional, we want to, and probably in theory could help anybody. We can help anybody with the system of Reiki because it's such an elegant and flexible system. However, it very much benefits us to be able to speak to some specific people. Who are the specific people that we are meant to work with? That might be a particular type, a person who's had particular types of experiences, people who are living a particular type of lifestyle, people who are, experiencing a particular type of stress or pain or, whatever that thing is, so that you can really talk to those people specifically, what their concerns are, and really, present yourself as somebody who has specific knowledge about them, right? Because, if you think about looking for, a chiropractor, right? There's thousands of chiropractors. how do you choose, from all of these people? But if you hear a chiropractor who's like, I specifically work with people who have been through multiple pregnancies and they're working through adjustments in their body that are the result of those pregnancies, and I work specifically with that person and I know how to work with that person, then those people are going to really pay attention to your marketing. And it's the same thing with Reiki. And this is something that I really struggled with quite a bit because I did want to help everybody. And I spoke about Reiki in very generalized terms. And so it's taken me quite a while to really understand who my client is and to niche down into those folks. If you have been practicing for a while and do have some track record of clients, it can be helpful to look back over those clients and say, is there any patterns here? Are there any particular types of folks who tend to be drawn to me? And then, that can help you to clarify who your market is. Once you have some sense about that, then you got to go to where they are, right? And you've got to be able to have those conversations about Reiki in a way that it lets people see you. I love, Carrie, that you said you got to get used to talking about what you do, and to have different ways of talking about your practice that might speak to different folks. Again, that basic breakdown of people who know Reiki and are looking for Reiki and people who have never heard of Reiki, have no idea what it is, but would absolutely want the outcomes of receiving a Reiki session. So you need to be able to talk to those different folks and then going to where they are. If you have an in-person Reiki business, many of us at this point have, offer distant services or in-person services. Some people specialize in one or the other. But assuming that you've got some part of your business that is focused on in-person clients, having them come, to you, providing opportunities for them to get to know you, to hear you talking about Reiki, from your heart in spontaneous settings, but also according to, something that you've prepared so that you know what you're going to share, is absolutely invaluable. Because if people just, Google Reiki in my area and they come up with various websites, it goes without saying that if you're going to have a website, which I think in this day and age, if you're going to have an actual business or any kind of practice that you're really wanting to disseminate to the masses, you got to have a website. So obviously you want that to be clean and, beautiful and clear and easy to understand and reflective of you so that, your vibe is on there. That's a different conversation. I'm not going to go into website specific stuff. Maybe that's something we'll talk about in the future. If you're interested in that, let us know. But let's say it goes without saying, you've got a website. It's beautiful. It's clear. How does a person though choose between all of those different things? If they have an opportunity to interface with you in real life, whether that's on video, whether it's in person, they'll have a much better sense of who you are. Do they know anything about you? Do they like you? Do they trust you? Those are the three things that people really lean into when they're making a choice to do something intimate and vulnerable, which a Reiki session absolutely is. It costs them money, it costs them time, and it puts them in a position that's intimate and vulnerable. And so they got to trust you. They got to know you. They got to like you. And so some of the things that I've done in the past and that are in my connection plan, marketing plan for 2024, I'm really pivoting my marketing back to in-person specific for obvious reasons. Over the past few years, pretty much everything I've done has been very online focused. My whole business had to pivot to online, as did basically everybody's in 2020. And that was really powerful to get to experience connecting with a wider audience. I now have students and clients all over the world. I'm grateful for that. But I realized that I had shifted so far to online that I had been neglecting connecting with my immediate community. And Carrie, you're such a beautiful example of really cultivating in-person connection opportunities. That I really appreciate. So that's really on my plan for this year. And so I'm going to be planning a fairly large event at a local community center that's part of a housing development that has a bunch of people that are relatively like-minded to me. I know people in that community, so there's already some connection there. I'm just going to offer, a talk about how I practice Reiki, what it means to receive Reiki, what are those outcomes that a person can expect, and then to guide a group self-practice and do some hands-on work in a group setting. Things like that can be done in all kinds of places, at libraries, community centers, local businesses who are open to hosting events like that, other wellness centers, yoga studios. There's many, many, many places that would welcome some free programming that offers something to their community that is unique and special, and that gives you a chance to put yourself in front of your community and talk about what you do. And, you know, that can be a really vulnerable thing to approach those places and say, hey, would you be interested in having me come and do this? But it is absolutely worth your time because that is really how you get to have that face-to-face interaction. I think I will pause there. I've got a few other thoughts in mind, but I think I've shared quite a bit. And so I'd love to hear what Bronwen has to say before I go any further.
Thanks, Michaela. Yeah, wow, what you both said, I think there was so much there, you know. Carrie, great hints, really. I mean, I think there's so, you know, I love talking about that, you know, that tender sort of phase that you're talking about. And I think, you know, in that, it was just reminding me of things, you know, that I've done in the past. And as teachers, we can really help our students move into that space where they begin to find clients. And you've both touched on that. And I know I've done things like yoga open days, because for me, it seems like 90% of all Reiki clients have done yoga. You know, I mean, there is this real crossover between these things. So, you know, that's what you were saying, Michaela, have a look at that, look back at and see where have your clients come from, right? So, you know, at a yoga open day, taking students there and offering free little mini treatments, and you're helping your students to get used to stepping out into a more public arena and doing treatments while you're there to support them. You know, those sorts of things are great. And I think a lot of Reiki schools and teachers do things like that, and that is a really, if you're looking at doing a Reiki course, look to those things. Find someone who is going to support you and help you get out there, especially if you want to become a professional, because actually doing it is the key. And I think that it sort of all comes back to the word confidence and learning to become confident in that practice. We can in a class become a little confident, but we are still in a little nest and we're being looked after. So when we fall from that nest and, you know, we have to work out and do it on our own, it can be really overwhelming. And you know, I've had students come back from doing Reiki 1, they come back to do Reiki 2, and they're like, yeah, well, I haven't really practiced on anyone because I couldn't find anyone, you know, and I really feel for them in that sense, because it's hard to broach the subject with people. And I always say, you know, with your family, it can be really difficult because they don't see you as necessarily this, you know, healer or whatever word you want to use, you know, this person who has this skill. That's not the image or idea that they have of you. You know, they think of you as the little brother or sister or, you know, their child. And so moving into this space of doing something different can be really challenging. So finding that confidence, how do we find the confidence? And I think, you know, it's always coming back into ourselves. And you both talked about self-practice. I think to find clients, Michaela, you said, you know, you need to be someone who's trustworthy and liked. You know, that's what they need to feel for you. Yeah. Well, how do we do that? You know, the best way to do that is to work on ourselves and to be this person that is an honest person with integrity who knows what they're doing. And just working on ourselves, by practicing on ourselves, we start to gain greater awareness. So through just simple practices, meditation practices, also hands-on healing, starting to really learn what it means to use your hand, and also develop the mind. So better understanding of what it is you're doing, why you're doing it. So integrating these different things into your life to help you be the best practitioner that you can possibly be. If you're that, when people meet you, and this is what Carrie was saying, when one person meets you, then that person, if they feel that from you, if they feel you know what you're doing, they feel safe with you because you're confident, then they are going to they're going to be open in the treatment, so they're going to have a great treatment. If someone is terrified of their practitioner in a treatment, they're going to lie there and they're going to be totally closed and scared and just wish that they were out of the room. So creating yourself as the environment for that person, and then that person will really love it, and they'll be telling other people about it. So that, I think, coming back to ourselves is probably the first port of call for any of this work.
And I feel really bad that I was meaning to mention this when we first started talking about this, but this whole topic of finding clients kind of comes from, well, it does come from the Reiki Business Collective. So one of our amazing podcast listeners, Christian Standing Stones, he has this group called the Reiki Business Collective, and it's really growing, beautiful community on Facebook, and he has a podcast called the Reiki Business Collective, and based on feedback and a poll in that community, like the number one thing everybody wanted to know about, like, I mean, there's like 10 topics there. The number one thing everybody wanted to learn about was how to get clients. And, I think that is, well, there's a question of integrity there too, which I hope it's okay to bring it up. But not every certificate we learn, not every skill we gain is meant to get us more money or to put ourselves out there professionally. It can be just for yourself. And I know that that's a really delicate, challenging balance, considering our financial realities these days, considering the fact that so many women are undervalued for their time, their services. But just to know that, we can just take these certifications to benefit ourselves, to better ourselves. And if it is something that you're already doing professionally and you want to gain more skills, I think Reiki is also really wonderful to work in combination with other healing practices and modalities. And that, as I've seen it for myself and for other Reiki students that I've had, is those tend to be the ones who have the most success, is that they're already building a business for themselves with perhaps another modality, and then they bring in Reiki, or Reiki is kind of part and parcel of a few different threads that they bring together. And so that does a lot of wonderful things. First of all, is you're building a practice that's really built upon you as a healer or as a practitioner, and it gives you many different ways to work with people. And I think you'd be surprised if you go through an analysis for yourself, like how many different skills you actually really do have. As humble as it is to start, there's probably already threads of, you wanting to give to others in a healing capacity that come way before you learning Reiki. Or sometimes actually too, it's really nice to blend like artistry. So if you're already an artist and you take a Reiki course, and it just really helps you um, you know manifest your art in a different way, to bring more of your spirit into your work. So there's just, I think that's one wonderful way to grow as a Reiki practitioner. If you really feel that drive, is just to continue to develop yourself as, your interests, your passions, your hobbies, bringing that forward to your community, and creating things that really matter, matter to you personally because they're meaningful, that they put your heart and soul into, and that, people see that, and, they want to receive that beauty from you. And I think what you mentioned, Michaela, is so beautiful too, is that know, like, and trust factor. And that's a big one. And, what I do find and what I have experienced, I think is again, is kind of more of like a point of tenderness sometimes, is that to work with somebody meaningfully in a spiritual capacity, it does take a higher level of know, like, and trust at times. So it's a little different than being like, oh, I'll reach out to my neighbor about fixing my roof, or like, won't necessarily reach out to your friend about, doing a counseling session with her or something like that. That like it does, it requires a really specific type of connection, community connection, is to really feel like there's a trust and a safety and a support to engage in a process where you're either learning from somebody or you're receiving their gifts. So, yeah.
Carrie, there was one thing I was thinking about when you were talking before. You also have applied for grants and things like that, haven't you? I think that's
Yeah. So,
interesting.
good point. Yeah. So, and that really comes down to creating a specialty. So, for me, I am really passionate about working with marginalized communities, working in the field of decolonization, spiritual appropriation, and it inspired me to reach out to a Native American community near me, and I got a grant to offer wellness services to their community. And it was just such a great win because I got to receive, a fair rate for my time, but also work with a marginalized community that otherwise probably couldn't afford to get, private Reiki treatments for me, or yoga classes, or wouldn't have that capacity in their community. They don't have that accessibility. So that is such a great, especially really wonderful if you have like a professional background. So like if you do have an experience working as a counselor, or in a mental health field, or physical health field. I'm not saying that right, but like as a nurse or something in that capacity, like there could be a really wonderful partnership you can create with a corporation, a company. And offering some wellness services to companies can be a really great way to gain experience, get a great rate for your time, and really help somebody or a group of people who otherwise wouldn't have access to your services. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, again, that speaking to the importance of having a specialization, as you said, or a niche or a focus area where you can really articulate how you connect with the people who are represented by that specialization, to help to build that connection and that authority, that authenticity that you can bring to that. I wanted to, kind of continue along that line of connection and, having opportunities to be in front of people and to articulate your particular specialty, your particular perspective on Reiki, the way that you talk about it. Reiki is not a monolithic thing. There are many ways of practicing it. There's many ways of talking about it. As listeners of this podcast know, the three of us have a specialty around focusing on the origins of the system of Reiki and practicing from those origins, which means that we talk about it in ways that are a little bit different than other practitioners. And so, being able to, really articulate that for the people that we are working with, and to have opportunities to be in front of them as much as possible, is really valuable. And so certainly we would be remiss if we didn't mention the online ways of having those conversations. We're having one right now here on this podcast with all of you. We are articulating our specialty and our perspective on the system of Reiki and these services that we provide. That's not the primary function of this podcast, but it is a function of this podcast. We get to talk to you about what matters to us in our practice. And of course, there are many ways of doing that. Being a guest on folks' podcasts, if you're not up for starting your own, is a really beautiful way to do that. You really, part of this is feeling into what feels authentic for you. There's many, many different ways of communicating with potential clients, and some of them might feel really well aligned for you. Some of them might feel really not aligned at all, right? So going out in front of a bunch of people in person and doing a talk might be something that you need to work up to, that might not feel comfortable to begin with. There's great value in putting ourselves in positions that are a little uncomfortable, stretching our skill sets, right? We need to be able to do that. And there's also great value in knowing what does come naturally, what does come easily for us, so that we can really lean into those places and let something be a little bit easier while we're flexing in these other areas. For me, I was a little bit surprised when I first started marketing my business. I love writing. I think I'm a good writer. I've always gotten a lot of really positive feedback for my writing. So I figured, well, I'll start a blog. I'll write about Reiki and all of these things. But what I found was that writing according to a schedule, according to kind of a coherent structure as far as the communication that's being made, and in a relatively quick turnaround time, did not suit me well at all. Turns out I take forever to write an article or a blog post. I get super perfectionist about editing it and saying it exactly the right way, and I reread it 1,000 times. And it ended up being a source of stress and frustration, and I just wasn't doing it enough. I was working on it constantly, but I wasn't publishing often enough for it to really benefit me. To my great surprise, what I found did come more easily and where I could lean into more regularity and a quicker turnaround was on YouTube, talking on videos, which was not something that came comfortable for me to begin with. I shied away from it. I'm like, I don't want to be on a video. But during 2020, when we needed to find creative ways to connect with each other, I just kind of casually started a YouTube channel just to honestly connect with people, because I was lonely and bored. And I found that was actually a really well-aligned way for me to talk about my Reiki practice. So I really leaned into that. And so, we can approach this in a playful way, right? Trying different things out, seeing what feels comfortable, what feels like a bit of a stretch, but that we're willing to do. And let ourselves try it out. On my YouTube channel, I have a podcast-like series. It's an interview series. And I love talking with folks who aren't necessarily Reiki practitioners, but whose work has similar outcomes to the system of Reiki. I love finding those connections. And I often am having guests on who have never done something like that before, have never been on a podcast or done a video. There's often nervousness about it. And I really love kind of creating a container around those folks to try out, this new way of being, and to, just really be able to talk about what they're passionate about, in a space that's going to reach more people than if we're having one-on-one conversations. So letting yourself stretch a little bit, try out the various different structures that are in place to connect with people. It's so much easier now than it used to be. Having a podcast, a YouTube channel, a blog, a website, it's just become so normal that it's really logistically easy to set those things up. Sometimes the hard part is kind of pushing through our own vulnerability about it, and to really discern, what is that specialization? How am I going to talk about Reiki, to those people who need to hear it? And again, circling back, I just want to reemphasize this point of really observing who are the people that you really feel called to work with, or who are at hand, and what matters to them. Right? What is their relationship with something like the system of Reiki? I had a really fascinating conversation with a student the other day. She had taken my Cultivating a Trauma-Informed Reiki class, and was working on bringing trauma-informed practices into her practice. And she was just starting out. And the question that she wanted to follow up on was, how do I talk to my community about Reiki? Because I live in a very conservative Christian community. She herself was a former Christian pastor, had a very strong Christian faith. and, had found a way to kind of incorporate Reiki into that in a way that felt authentic to her. Not everything that she learned in her Western Reiki class felt good, felt aligned, felt authentic. She felt confused about, can I leave some of these things behind? It was a great relief to her when she found out that manifesting and psychic readings were not actually the system of Reiki. So she could definitely leave those things behind because they did not work for her and they're not Reiki. So win-win. But how do you talk to a potential client base who would very much benefit from Reiki sessions, but who are going to be very averse to something that either comes across as too new age, woo-woo, hippie, weird spirituality, or that's going to come across as very overtly Buddhist, which somehow, sometimes I talk about Reiki from a very Buddhist perspective because those are its origins. So we had a great conversation about how she can lead with, what is the essence of those outcomes that people can experience, deep rest and relaxation, release of anxiety and fear, feeling more connected to themselves, giving themselves some space to release and to rest and to receive, and to be in a compassionate container with somebody who wants to tend to those things. We came up with some ways that she could talk about Reiki that were very authentic to herself, that were authentic to Reiki, and that her community could hear, could receive from her. And that felt really, really good to her. So those are the kinds of conversations that can be really beneficial to have with other people in your community, whether or not they're Reiki people. What matters to them? What outcomes are they seeking? And how can I talk about Reiki in a way that meets them in that place? It doesn't emphasize parts of Reiki that don't align. Alternately, if your practice is very much in the realm of New Age Western, Reiki that is really leaning heavily into that side of things, then those are your people, right? Those are the people that you're going to want to serve, and, finding the places to meet them and to talk with them in these similar ways is going to serve you best. So those were just a few other pieces that I wanted to touch on. I'm really glad, Carrie, that you brought up Christian Standing Stone and those resources, because for anybody who's looking for support in building their Reiki business, for looking for community around that, he's really created some great spaces. So we'll put those links in the show notes. That is the Reiki Business Collective on Facebook, the Build Your Reiki Business podcast, and Christian Standing Stone on YouTube. So lots of ways to get connected with that community and the many resources that he provides for folks like you who might be wanting to start your Reiki business. That's what I've got.
Fantastic. I think there's so many pointers there for everyone, whether you're just someone who's wanting to be in that space and to branch out of your little world into the world around you, communicate with others with the system of Reiki, or whether you want to do it professionally. Thanks, guys. Some really great hints. If you've got anything to add, if we missed something, is there something that you do that you feel has really helped and might be something helpful for someone else, please pop it in the comments below. And for the rest, remember to like us. And Carrie's got something very important to say. Yes, Carrie.
Sorry. I know we talk so many words, but I do want to mention that I think getting some professional help, if you want to build a Reiki practice and you want to become a Reiki practitioner, don't just try to do it yourself. Really seek out some solid business support. And I have a mentorship program that I love and adore, and it's now accepting some new clients for it. So if you're interested in that, please explore, we'll leave that link too in the show notes, and explore all the things that the Reiki Business Collective has. There are tons of resources out there for solo small business owners. And, Michaela and I did a training together that was really supportive and helpful. So, there's just tons of, and I know, Bronwen, you do coaching weekly or monthly coaching circle.
I do it in groups online, but I also do private online. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So don't feel like you have to reinvent it. And There was a period of time where I could talk about my business with my husband and get some advice on whether I should say it this way or that way. So at some point, you kind of lose the capacity to do that with your close friends and family. So, it's really nice to have some, mentorship, some business support, so that you just don't have to feel like you're doing it all yourself, because that can be really overwhelming as well. So, anyway, sorry, one little point
No,
I
good
wanted
point.
to add.
Good point. Yeah. So do that, and also like this. Yes, that's a good thing to do. And join our group, Embodying Reiki, where we do chat about the podcasts that we've done and some other things as well. And we look forward to seeing you there, and we look forward to seeing you next week as well. Until then, bye.